And very often, when you start to go within and start to pay attention to that inner world, at least in my case and many that I've spoken to, we start to find little things that don't seem to belong, things that we maybe thought we had dealt with. So things like deep loneliness or despair might come up when you start to get quiet inside. And I know I thought to myself, well, when I felt this kind of despair, I thought, well, I'm not lonely. I have friends. What's going on here? And what I eventually discovered is that I was triggering an emotional trauma that I had maybe 20 years ago in my childhood that I hadn't really dealt with and I had just stored into my system. And so it's really important to understand all of your emotional reactions, all of the kinds of limiting beliefs you might have about things that you want to generate happening in your life. By going within, by establishing this practice of triggering emotional traumas and releasing them and understanding where beliefs might be getting in your way. These are the subconscious beliefs that maybe we're not quite aware of. We want to clear out all those conflicts and find real clarity inside. And when you can really release all of the limiting beliefs and emotional reactions, that's when you really start to align with that more expanded nature of who we all truly are made of. Our hearts are influencing the people around us, and we can pay attention and we know who those people are who maybe make us feel uncomfortable and those others who make us feel very good and welcome. And this is really interesting to note. But along with noting what is going on in other people's heart fields, it's most useful to pay attention to what's going on in your own heart field. Your own heart field is the only one that you have the ability to manage directly, and you do it by learning to manage your emotional state. And so this idea of generating feelings of gratitude, for me, this was very difficult. I knew how to think of things I was grateful for, but generating a feeling was different. I seem to be one of those people, and there may be many of us out there, who learned how to shut down my feelings in order to protect myself from being hurt. But at the same time, I lost the ability to generate at will these really good types of feelings. And so I had to practice for a while. It's this sort of warm kind of energy that you feel in your heart. And when you really focus on it, you can feel it expand around your body. And all of us can do this. Say in a line at a bank or a grocery store, where maybe some people are in a bad mood because it's taking too long. When I imagine my heart expanding around my body with these good feelings, I can see people's mood change. And so this can be very useful to just try in your own life. It's fascinating to read about this kind of research, but applying it in our lives is what I find to be the most useful way to kind of use this information to help myself and also others. And I call this the ultimate golden rule. You know how we want to treat others as we would like to be treated? Well, the ultimate golden rule is placing this kind of self-love, these loving feelings in your heart, knowing that it's affecting people around you in positive ways. And so if all humans on the planet, or even the majority of us, can learn how to do this, imagine how our world might change. This idea of feeling gratitude is really a beautiful way to think about this idea of loving yourself. I know when I grappled with that concept, it was very challenging for me to think about directing love towards myself, because many of us, when we're very young usually, we try to protect ourselves from things that happen. In my case, my parents, my mother and father, were divorced at a very young age, and they involved me and my brothers very directly in this decision by sitting us down when I was 7 years old and asking us, which parent would you like to live with? They asked us to make that choice. Now, at this time, my father had been in Vietnam for 2 years, and I didn't really know him that well because he hadn't been around. So for me, it was a very easy decision. I said, well, of course I want to live with my mother. And I decided in that moment that I didn't need my father. Now, at that moment, it felt like the very thing I needed to do to keep myself to be strong, to not miss him and feel so sad that he wasn't around. But what I effectively ended up doing was shutting down my ability to receive love from men, basically. And so this worked fine when I was a child, but as I got older and I wanted to get into relationships with others, I had built this wall around my heart, a wall I didn't even realize existed. And it's when I started meditating, especially when I started doing Sufi heart rhythm meditation, where we started to put a lot of awareness on the heart. And we did this by imagining our breath was moving in and out of our heart. Just that simple act alone triggered these feelings of abandonment, of being alone, of having no one there, and despair. And I didn't know where it came from. And then I realized eventually, it wasn't quick, this can take a little time, but I had done it to myself. And we all do this. When we're rejected as children from our peers, maybe from an abusive parent, or maybe a teacher or minister says something in a certain way that hurts us and we don't understand. And I call these baby wounds because they happen to us before we can really have the bigger picture of maybe why a parent or teacher said a certain thing. They're wounds inside that happened before we understood what was going on, and we set up little systems to protect ourselves. And so as adults, as grown-ups, it is very useful to go in and understand maybe if you're having issues in relationships, or maybe you're having an issue where you can't hold down a steady job. What did you potentially do when you were very young and didn't realize how it might affect you later in life? But all of them are related to things that we probably didn't mean to do to ourselves. And it can be very useful to go within, find out what those things are in your own life, and release them. These kinds of things can really set you free to really manifest the things that you want to have in your life. It's so easy, especially in relationships or any kind of issue, to blame others for our problems. It's always something else beyond our control. But in relationship, it can be very useful when you're triggered somehow by something that someone else is doing to not blame the other person, but to look inside yourself and wonder, what is inside of me that's causing that trigger? Why am I responding to this particular behavior in this way? And so by focusing on the inner world, lots of things can change in the outer world. And this happened for me. I didn't realize really the extent of how this could go until I started meditating. I did have a relationship I wasn't satisfied with. I did have a job I wasn't satisfied with. I lived in a location that I wasn't satisfied. And I wondered, how could I change all of those things? And it was very challenging to think about making all of those changes. But when I started going within and I started to release all of these limiting beliefs and these old traumas, I didn't realize that by cleaning up my inner world, by really developing and cultivating that peaceful inner sanctum, then my outer world started to change. All by itself. It was completely amazing how all of this took place. And I've met other people, I'm not alone. I tell other people this and they will say the same thing happened to them, that when they started to focus on their inner world, that everything in their outer world started to shift on its own. And this even extended to issues with my daughter, that teenager I was having troubles with. I used to, want to fix her. I would want to talk to her teachers and straighten her friends out and change what clothes she was wearing and all of that. But when I started focusing on my inner world and didn't worry about her anymore, of course I still worried, but I didn't actively try to make changes in her life, she started to make changes in her life on her own. It was amazing. And so I think we all kind of set these templates for others to follow. Somehow, I believe it's related to that electromagnetic field of the heart. When my electromagnetic field gets smooth and I'm around my daughter, hers automatically starts to get smoother. And so again, this ultimate golden rule, by focusing on ourselves and creating that self-love, we end up helping others in ways that are so mysterious but obvious once they take place.